So again, good morning and welcome. Today we're going to talk about intent to conduct camp and looking at the 2013 standards for 4-H camps in Washington State as kind of the basis where it talks about the intent to do camping. And I appreciate you taking the time this morning to join us. And I always like to say that camp planning, especially camp planning, begins with the end in mind, that we have to envision what it is that we're going to attempt to do at camp, and then to take that vision and then work backwards and do the planning. So I like Stephen Covey's quote of begin with the end in mind. And of course, just as we would any other 4-H session, please join me in reciting the 4-H pledge. So I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, my health for better living, for my club, my community, my country, and my world. So thank you for joining me in that. I think it's so important, especially at camp, that we connect kids to the pledge. And not only the pledge to the American flag, but then also to the 4-H pledge, because for me, it helps that group to signal that we're into the learning and the youth development process that 4-H is about. I also want to make sure that we do our due diligence in connecting to And Justice for All for our civil rights planning. And I include this in all my presentations. So let's start by looking at the camp standards. And again, these are the 2013 camp standards. We will be looking at revising the camp standards and probably looking at a combination of camp standards and then 4-H camp policies that would be in place for the 2018 camp year. So we've got a group that will begin looking at that, and Tracy Hansen is part of that group, and as well as a couple faculty and a couple other staff from around the state be working with me to help revise the current camp standards and look at those as potential policies. So look for good things to come. But the 2013 camp standards are the ones that are in place for this year, 2017 camp year. And that will be kind of the basis for how we operate camps across the state of Washington. As always, if you have questions about camp or camp standards or policies, please make sure you give me a call or email. So what we're going to do today is going to look at what does it take for camp to be successful. We're going to look at planning for future success, and we're going to look at the business of camp. And the intent to camp is really kind of the beginning of looking at the business to camp. So as we go through this today, make sure that if you have questions, you can use the chat. And if you could either put your questions into the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and to ask your questions. So interrupting me is okay. So probably better if you do interrupt me. So as you go along. So we're going to look at the big picture. And one of the quotes that I really like comes from Forrest Whitcraft. And that's 100 years from now, it won't matter what kind of car I drove, what kind of house I lived in, how much money I had in the bank, nor what my clothes looked like. But the world may be a little better place because I was important in the life of a child. And as all of you know, I mean, I'm really kind of preaching to the camp choir here, is that camp can have a profound impact on young people's lives and volunteers' lives, as kind of evident by the 12 camps we have throughout the state of Washington. And so what we do, what you do in 4-H camp makes a profound difference on the not only youth development, but on the life of children. And just to illustrate how important this could be, when I was in Florida, before I came to Washington, I was in a county where we actually had a state-run camp, and the camp had an open house and invited the community to come and visit their camp. There was a gentleman who came who had not been in 4-H camp, but had been in a youth camp in his youth, in his early days, and he was in late 70s, maybe 80s. And so he came to check out camp and to see what it was. And he met with the camp director there and told his story about how camp had changed his life. And the gentleman then proceeded to write a $60,000 check right there for the camp with no strings attached. And so camp makes a profound impact on young people's lives that can carry over to their adult life. And many folks who experience camp feel the need at some point in their life to give back to camp. And hopefully it's to 4-H camp when they decide to come back. The other thing is that, just as our 4-H model uses the do, reflect, apply, the experiential model, so does our camp processes. And the more that we can involve the volunteers that help us with camp in the planning and helping them to do, reflect, and apply about that planning experience, the better I think our plans will be as we go forward. So as we know that any planning, it's age-appropriate activities with youth, and we use the experiential learning effectively to help develop youth and adult partnerships that focus in on citizenship, leadership, and other life skills with the end goal of promoting a sense of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity, which of course are the essential elements of 4-H. And so camp is no different than any of our other programs. It's just another delivery mechanism that we have. But I will say it's my favorite way to deliver 4-H. And I think it's because we have that intensity of that 3 days to 7 days of kids really kind of focused in not only on the development of life skills, but then also the relationships that they make, and then all focused on research-based education that helps them connect not only to their camp community, but to the community in general and around the 4-H principles. And that there is a magic, I think, that happens with 4-H camp that is different from any other youth camp that kids may have the opportunity to connect with. And I think that connection, that mindfulness of connecting around the essential elements of 4-H and building that community in a very positive way with the focus on life skills really does make a difference. And when it's intentional in how we deliver the program, I think that it really comes into play with kids and makes that the magic of 4-H camp. So we're going to start looking at some of the program planning, and the first is the notice of intent to administer a resident camp. So so any 4-H program within the state of Washington must provide written notification to the Washington State 4-H Camp Management Group as indicated. So if a camp is 3 days or less in duration and 50 participants or less days, then it's the notice is required for 30 days. If your camp is more than 3 days or involves greater than 50 participants, then 60-day notice is required. And if you've got a club that is camping, what is the notice of intent requirement for a club if you have a single club that's camping? This is a quiz. This is the interactive part. So who do you have to tell if a club is going to camp?
Well, in my county, they have to tell me.
Okay. And then do you have to tell me?
I don't know. I never have before.
Well, that's because you don't have to tell me.
Okay.
But thank you for answering. So if a club is going to camp, then you should have a similar process within your county where you collect the information. But I don't need to be informed unless you run into a problem, and then you're going to inform me. But the requirement is that those clubs are still responsible for following the camp standards, but it is the local county's responsibility for maintaining the intent to camp, and then also for making sure that there's compliance with the standards. Because just because it's a 4-H club doesn't mean that they're exempt from following the same standards that you are as a county when you run your camp. So they need to do the due diligence that you do with me, with you. And so the risk management plan, the other plans should be in place, and you can determine your deadlines. But I would say no less than 30 days so that you have time to react to anything that may need to be shored up in their planning process. So good answer, Shannon. If I had virtual chocolate, I would give it to you. So the notification to administer a resident camp includes a form that has the following things that are included in it. And again, if you're doing it, if you have a club that's doing it on the county level, then you want the same type of information. So the date of camp, the place of camp, who's going to be director, who is that primary contact person, supporting extension staff member, and then contact information during the camp, and then a written risk management plan. And that's part of section 11 of the camp standards. So any questions about what goes into the intent to camp? And then those intent to camps, the forms, even though if you get the web form, it's going to say send it to Puyallup. There is not much left in Puyallup today, so those can come to me, and electronic is fine. So I don't need a hard copy, but I do need an electronic copy to me, and then we maintain those here. If you don't get a acknowledgement from me within a couple days, then feel free to nag me. So I give you permission to nag me if you haven't gotten a response within a couple days, because I usually try to look at those and at least acknowledge that I have it. I usually do a quick glance of the risk management plan within the day or two, and then within probably a week, you're going to get my list of here's my questions. And as Sherry Ledgerwood can tell you, that sometimes that list can be 20 or 30 questions on my part of things that, as I read through the risk management plan, things that jump out at me as the things that keep me awake at 3 o'clock in the morning when I think about the operation of camps. And so I always like to have those questions answered so I can sleep a little bit better. So again, if you don't get an acknowledgement that says, your risk management plan looks good, or if you don't get my list of questions, then feel free. I give you permission to nag me as much as you can. As things get busier here throughout the summer, but let's make sure that we have that connection on your risk management plans so that you're in compliance. And one of the things that the risk management plan does is that it helps to spread your liability of camp to me, as far as having that plan in place, and my acknowledgement of your risk management plan means that I've looked at it and you're in compliance with what we're expecting for the camp season. So help me to help you by making sure that we've got the best risk management plans available. So within your counties, make sure that with your camp committees, if you have a camp committee, that annually you're going through that risk management plan and saying what happened last year that wasn't covered or that needs to be covered in this year's plan. And I think that would be very useful use of their time in reviewing at some point after camp the things that went well, things that need some shoring up, and then if there's any risk management planning that may be there. So happened to be at Tracy's camp this last year doing a site visit, and they had kind of a mental health issue with a camper, and they handled it extremely well. Tracy, I don't know, does your current risk management plan, does it cover the mental health issues as part of your risk management plan today?
You know, we're working with the camp committee to review it right now, and I'm not remembering whether it has that component in it or not. Definitely something we'll check on.
But I can't commend you enough, watching that kind of unfold and being there at camp and seeing how your staff dealt with that, because they felt it was a mandatory reporting issue and handled it extremely well. So
yes, I am very, very privileged to get to work with fabulous volunteers. So
yeah. And so I was really impressed with camp and dealing with that kind of situation. So and I don't always get to be there when stuff happens, so it's kind of good to see that things go well. So good job in training and in connecting with volunteers. So the other components that I think really help to make a camp very successful, and I know this looks like a daunting list, but the intent to camp is really kind of the first component of the planning, and I think that there's opportunities if we engage our camp volunteers, including team volunteers, in helping to look at these other types of plans. I think it gives them the opportunity to kind of fully engage in kind of learning about camp from different angles, not only from the program side, but also from kind of the business of running camp. Because I mean, basically, if you look at camp, it's a business. We've got we take dollars in, either grants or if we take camp fees in. There is that kind of fiscal component of it. We ask, many times we ask community organizations or partners to donate to camp. And in doing so, we're either marketing our camp or requesting for donations. So that has some implications and also a fiscal and kind of a business plan. And then staffing. So whether it's volunteer staffing or if it's any paid staffing, that also requires some planning to know that we've got the right number of folks to help cover in the kind of the educational disciplines that we're asking them to, as well as management of those staff. And again, we look at volunteers, basically sometimes in the realm of university employees who are not paid but volunteer, and we have a responsibility to help to develop them as well as to manage them and to train them. And each of those components needs to be documented and actually planned on how you're going to do that. If you actually own the camp, then there's the camp maintenance plan, and part of that maintenance plan is also looking at the infrastructure and making sure that the infrastructure is fit for camp, and that may include working with health departments and other county agencies to help make sure that things are in place. If we own the camp or if we're an advisor to a camp, then we may want to look at natural resources or environmental planning for the camp. And then the last component, which also fits in with the intent of camp, is the emergency management and risk management plans. And those can either be separate or connected or as one plan. But both aspects, both emergency management and then also managing risks need to be, should be addressed in any kind of camp situation. And I know I've been talking about business plans for camp for the last 3 years, and I'm going to assume, but if you can kind of chime in, how many of you actually have been working on a formal business plan for your camp? I'm okay with awkward silence. Okay, so hopefully down the road, as we look at camp, it becomes more important as things go on with camp, like Camp Neighborly, where we have changes in management of the properties, and where we have significant cost increases, or that we get the need to look at expansion or contraction of how many kids get to go to camp. A business plan really does help to focus the efforts of camp planning as kind of an overall kind of planning. But also, I've found that when you're asking folks for money, especially if you're asking business folks for money, that having a clear mission and vision, and in some cases helping them to understand the bottom line of camp is important. So let me ask this. Did your camp make money last year? Do you know if your camp made money?
The Grays Harbor County Camp Committee has been working on a more formal budgeting process this past year or two,
Okay.
And they were able to show that they essentially broke even this year. And
Good.
So that's helped them. As you mentioned, some facilities are changing their pricing, and they encountered that a user fee changed considerably at our location. So they're using that budget plan to determine their registration fees for this year, which are going to be higher.
Yeah, so higher fees usually means the opportunity to go and look for camperships or scholarships, and so but helping groups understand. And should a camp, let me ask this question, should a camp make money?
If you own it and need to sustain it.
Yeah. So I mean that's part of the budget planning, but typically we try to be kind of neutral, try to break even on the cost of camps, and then keeping a limited kind of profit carryover for the next year is probably very appropriate, because there are some costs that go on beyond camp depending on how things are put together. Brenda Baldwin had a question about the ratio of adults per kids, and when doing a camp out type setting. So Brenda, it depends on the age of the youth, and then the type of activities that they're being part of, because some of those activities may have higher ratios, but generally it's typically 1 to 15, one adult to 15. But for things like swimming or challenge activities or kind of tripping kind of activities, it maybe could be 1 to 10. And then with young children, it may be 1 to 5, depending on the age and the activity levels. But so it kind of depends on the activities. And happy to talk with you more on that if you need better clarification. Any questions on the camp plans, the type of plans? So I know this looks like a long list, but really kind of a business plan could incorporate the majority of the other plans, the intent to camp, and then the emergency management and risk management plan is there. And so I think that I would like to see in our next round of standards or policies that we put in some information that looks at the fiscal management of camps, and that there'll probably be a stronger emphasis on fiscal budgeting for camps, and some guidance for each of the counties on how you do that. So even for a club that is going to do camping, I don't feel comfortable in kind of approving their camp plan in my county until I know how they're covering the costs of camp. Because that's one of the things is that I don't have a safety net in place for a club that's going to be doing a camp. And I want to know that they've looked at the costs. And it's kind of the same way as I look at fundraisers, is that if there's going to be that kind of fiscal exchange, then I want to at least have the opportunity to help them, guide them through that planning process. So even as county clubs look at camping, I would suggest we ask the question about how they're going to budget that.
Mike?
Yep.
Don't really want to open another can of worms, but as you're thinking forward on fiscal responsibility, would a legal fund, a certain, just amount in there be a good idea? Or would WSU be handling all that so an individual camp wouldn't have to worry about any funds that could be needed because of liability issues, et cetera?
Yeah, and typically we've got the liability coverage for volunteers and camps, and if just like we would for any county, there's also the medical insurance, the low cost medical insurance that would be covered. So when it comes to the ownership of the camps or the liabilities there, the current contract systems should address any of the liability information there. That's part of being part of the university and following the kind of the best management practices that are set up in camping, is that it then protects the staff that are involved with camp, and then also our volunteers. And in each of the counties where there's camps, I always recommend that folks kind of share that liability and responsibility all the way up to in counties to the county extension directors, that they're aware of camp and the camp planning that's going on, and should be aware of the risk management plans for camps as well. I think many times it falls to the 4-H staff who focus in on camps, and county extension directors aren't fully aware of their responsibility in the oversight of 4-H camp programs as well. So, and if you need help in helping to connect the county extension directors to responsibilities of camp, I'm happy to serve that role too. So there are a couple good business plans out there for successive camps. The YMCA, there's a pretty good one, and then ACA, American Camp Association, has a good site, some outlines for what would be included into a business plan. But I'm not going to go through all this, but these are some of the components that go into a business plan. Really, if you look at what you're doing in camp planning currently, you probably have the majority of these outlined, and easily could be put, just reconfigured into a business plan. So sometimes an executive summary is something that can be very helpful if you're looking for donations or to help explain camp in a more business standpoint to either county commissioners or community members. And so just an executive summary of what camp is doing can really go a long way in helping to explain what you're trying to do and put camp in kind of the business focus. The program section of any camp, of how you plan for program, is really kind of the meat. It's what gets folks excited about camp. It's all the things that you're planning to do, and then how you connect with those kind of things. So Brenda's got a question about a horse club that was asking that questions about their activities would be horse involved. And there is a section within the standards that talks about horses at camp. And there's also a state equine 4-H specialist. My mind just went blank. I'll come up with it, but
Jennifer Leach?
Yeah, Jennifer Leach. Yeah, thank you. So Jennifer Leach is a great resource for 4-H horse camps. And then also Gary Varela in Spokane County has, I think, 4 4-H horse camps that they operate. And they would be a good source for other information on horse camps. And again, if it's just within one club, then it is the county's responsibility to basically manage that information, and basically not under my purview as far as a state camp. But if it does become a county-wide camp and it goes for more than 3 days, then you're required to go through the intent to camp and to provide at least the risk management plan for the camp. So Brenda, does that answer your question? Okay. So also in the program section, you can look at specific programs for the goals, and it always helps to have camper quotes and photos. And also, if you do any impact studies or look at the evaluations for camp, that would be another place to go. Staffing, we'll probably do a session with Linda Lose talking about staffing, and especially if you're paying for staff. But what goes into a staffing section is looking at who are the key staff, volunteer or paid, kind of making sure that you keep track of the experience of each of the camp folks. Helps to have an organizational chart. How many of you have an organizational chart for your camp? You're thinking about it, right?
I'm about to make one.
All right. Because that not only helps you, but it kind of, I'm kind of more of a visual person, and sometimes seeing that organizational chart does help me to look at the questions. So the one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is that you're collecting kind of the experience and the background of the folks that you're having in those positions. And then any of the training that you provide, that you document and have them sign that they've taken that kind of training. And looking at recruitment, because not everyone stays forever. Eventually, they do retire from their camp. Sometimes we have to help them retire from camp. But looking at recruitment for new camp folks is kind of a continual basis. And if anybody has a certification, so your nurse, your waterfront folks, your lifeguards, anybody who's going to teach anything that would require your horse folks, anything that's going to archery that requires certifications, make sure that you physically get their certifications that you review them, and that you keep copies not only at camp but at the extension office. So I have actually run across a nurse who is not licensed. So it's important that you actually physically see the license of the folks that you may be hiring, even if they're a volunteer. So also first aid CPR cards, all that information should be documented, and then that should be available in a notebook at camp or in a file drawer at camp, as well as having copies back in the office. But it gets really important when there's accidents or injuries or problems that you have all that information as readily available as you would the health forms for everyone. So, but make sure that you document staff development throughout the year that you do, and it doesn't even hurt even the emails that you have with camp staff that print them and throw them into a notebook or a file drawer, or save them electronically into a kind of a safe electronic storage space. But just so that you've got that information as backup for your staffing. We'll probably cover more on the financial stuff in the future. But think about business plan as really kind of the culmination of the bringing together of your planning, and make sure that you're not doing it alone, that you're really involving the volunteers, you're involving other faculty that have a connection to camp, that you even go and look at the youth and, of course, any businesses that are partners with camp, that you're involving them in that long-term planning of looking at a camp. So, like I said, camp is really an intensive delivery of the 4-H youth development program, and it involves and creates immense loyalties of youth who become volunteers and still have that, or want to have that connection to camp. And so the better we can do at the long-term planning, I think the better we are at creating that positive cadre of volunteers, and not the ones that you have to help them retire. So I think the more that they're involved in planning and use that as an educational tool in planning, the better we are down the road. So I don't know how many of you are part of American Camp Association or have continued kind of the membership, but if you haven't been part of ACA, your first year is free, and I can get you the coupon to join. And it's worth about $300 for that coupon for a year, but it has a lot of resources that are available from ACA. And then it also has the American Camping Association magazine, and which is available electronically as well. But Robin Galloway from Oregon and I wrote an article this last year, and it'll be in one of the upcoming issues of American Camp Association. But it's dealing with difficult volunteers at camp, and especially those that feel like they own camp. And so it has some good ideas, and when that gets published, I'll share that with everyone as well. But the more we can do in the long-term planning and involving folks and using that as a training, the less we have to deal with difficulties, I think, down the road. Not that they won't come. I mean, we're dealing with volunteers, so it comes with the territory. Other considerations would be looking at the value of camp and properties, and then just some basic marketing. As I said earlier, even though that list looks like it's pretty daunting for camp planning, they're all really components of when you think about camp, that these are the kinds of things that you probably have stored in your head already. And I would encourage you to take that knowledge and information and try to transcribe that. And the camp plans are probably one of the easiest ways to format that, all that information that you've been storing in your head for all those years. So wrapping up, so we gave an overview of the intent, looked at a little bit of the business planning details, and some examples of those kinds of planning tools that may be available for you. So was the information useful? This helpful? Okay.
Yes.
Good. So let me know how you use this information in the future. And then the biggest question is, let me know what additional information that you need to be successful. Because my role as the state 4-H camp specialist is really to help you to have the best camp that you possibly can be. And so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help you, other than run your camp. But let me know what we can do to help support you in camp. Look for opportunities to connect with the team that's looking at the standards and the revamping of coming up with actual policies for camp. And know that you're always welcome to provide your feedback and input into what camp standards and policies we'll be working with in the future. And then Tracy and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. I am going to record this, so within the next day or two, this will be up and available for folks to watch this session. But if you need a connection, if you need me to connect with your volunteers or camp committee, I'm happy to schedule a Zoom meeting to around their schedules. So, evenings and weekends, I've got a fair amount of travel that I do, but Zoom makes it easy for me to connect from wherever I'm at. So if there's a need for a discussion on a specific topic, then please let me know how I can help and how we can schedule that. And then my travel budget for camp is not as beefy as it had been in the past. But if you would like a visit at camp just to help look at your planning and execution, then I'm happy to come and visit. So, and it probably will be more on an invitation basis this year than I've done in the past, where I've tried to get to as many as I can. But if you'd like a visit, let me know. We can schedule it and try to make it work. So, questions? As always, feel free to give me a call or email, or we can Zoom. Happy to do any of those to connect. So thanks a lot, and 4-H Camp rocks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yep, thanks. Bye.